I chose to really talk to you today about more of the touchstones that have helped me understand more deeply and broadly what liberation and justice making are about. And they come perhaps from more of a denominational and international point of view, but I think they are touchstones that help us as individuals living out Christian discipleship in a personal way, in a corporate way in congregations, or in any of the other understandings and manifestations of church that we have. So I want to talk about why are we talking about justice in the first place? What does justice look like? Theological reflection on justice, and church responses to injustice. So first of all, in just the large picture, obviously we live in a world where we're witnessing the breakdown of financial and economic systems, and we have a huge increase in conflict and militarism. Turn on your news. So if the church is to be relevant at all, what does the church say to all of this? And we have, of course, the ongoing destruction of the earth, our home. And so we know that these problems disproportionately affect women and children, the impoverished people, refugees, migrants, indigenous people, and populations in the global south. So that's another worrying thing. It may not affect us as much as it does when we hear the stories from other folk, our partners in the south. And the confluence of these crises, which we can name empire, compels the church to pray, to speak out, and to act in the public arena for the sake of a moral, sustainable economy and a peaceful world. So what does justice look like? And I start back at the biblical mandate. We start and hear in the Bible, in the Hebrew scriptures from the prophets, Isaiah, for instance, who talks about turning swords into plowshares. Peace, not war. Plowshares, interesting. To be farmers, to grow food. It's not turning swords into some other, I don't know what, gate or iron bars or something like that. Yes. Amos talks about righteousness and justice, and he uses those words synonymously. Righteousness is a standard of what is right. Justice is a realization of this standard. I think we have a hard time sometimes with the word righteousness. It sounds a bit too priggish somehow or other, but it's very important because it's about ethical and moral understandings. God's ancient covenant really reveals that God is just in keeping right relationship with the people of Israel, the people of ancient Israel, and the whole creation. The people are to be just in their relationship with each other, with the animals, the creatures, and the natural environment. We have Mary's Magnificat. You remember that? It reminds us once a year in Advent that we need to scatter the proud, bring down the mighty, and feed the hungry. Yes. Jesus in the temple, Luke 4, talks about how he understands God's mission for him to bring good news to the poor, liberty to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, and set free the oppressed. There's a compassion for those shut out by structures of empire. And by empire, I mean the intersecting oppressions of racism, colonialism, all the isms we can think of, heterosexism, et cetera, et cetera. Luke 19, Jesus instructs us to invite the outsiders to the welcome banquet. So there is a preferential option for outsiders, however we name them. In church tradition, I like to think that the church itself is a response and interpretation of the life and the teachings of Jesus. The church itself, it's a choice. It came about because of those teachings as a way to help us live them out. It's a means of practicing and embodying and facilitating the justice-loving, justice-seeking spirit of Jesus. God's mission is God's hope for the world. It is ongoing, broad, and inclusive of all people and forces that strive to uphold God's will for the restoration, fullness of life, and integrity of creation. And participation in this mission of God is an essential and inevitable expression of Christian discipleship. Sometimes I think in our congregations we get lost. We lose the core. We lose the core message in the middle. And we are so busy on all these other things that we've lost track of what is that core, what is that deep song calling us in our guts and heart to resonate with that is most important and is the place of accountability for whether we really are being faithful and lively. It relates to traditional understandings of the functions of ministry: liturgia, koinonia, kerygma, didache, and diakonia. What a surprise. An expression of compassion, as well as commitment to realize God's purposes for the world, namely justice and life for all. It's an expression of faithfulness to God, and it's embodied in the concrete situations of life, liberating and transforming situations and people. Diakonia holds forth the presence and the promise of the coming reign of God, and this needs to be much more deeply understood and lived out in our church in Canada and in the world. Theological reflections on justice, Letty Russell gives us 3 helpful principles, I think, to consider the power quotient when you're looking at a situation, when you're doing that analysis, to give priority to the outsider, and to acknowledge the unfolding nature of God's promise of love and justice as a safeguard against misuse of religious practices. And by that, I think she means that we learn as we continue to live into our theology, new meanings of doctrines become clear to us. For instance, post-colonial perspectives challenge former understandings of what it means to be a chosen people, the doctrine of election, the theology of land. Those are all hot topics embedded in many of our international and religious conflicts. General Council 41, in a way, lived out that kind of sense of adding the colors of the medicine wheel to the crest and officially including all faith statements since 1925 to its evolving theological understandings. So our theology evolves, and sometimes we have persecuted people with our former theologies. We need to examine the base of those practices and ask ourselves whether they still relate. And are they liberative? Are they loving? Are they life-giving? United Church Song of Faith. We sing of God's good news lived out, a church with purpose, faith nurtured and hearts comforted, gifts shared for the good of all, resistance to the forces that exploit and marginalize. That is active. That's an active call. Fierce love in the face of violence, human dignity defended, members of a community held and inspired by God, corrected and comforted, instrument of the loving Spirit of Christ, creation's mending. We sing of God's mission. In terms of responses to injustice, I quote Bev Harrison, and it arose last night in the conversation with Raheel and Stan. I always think of Bev Harrison's line that justice making is the power of anger and the work of love, and that sure feels right to me. And in terms of that work, it's the response I would call is advocacy. And in the United Church of Canada, we talk about that as public witness. It's grounded in our Reformed Protestant tradition. All the 3 founding denominations held on to that purpose. And it builds on the evangelical tradition in the 19th century of personal transformation, but moved and expanded to understand itself as social and political transformation in the 20th and 21st centuries. What is advocacy? It's action on political, economic, cultural, and social issues. It can be at any level of the church. It's not reserved for the national church, let me tell you. You need to be involved. But it's about bringing about that more just, peaceful kingdom of God, that sustainable world that we all want and that we're yearning for and our people are yearning for. Marginalized communities must be seen, however, at the center of any kind of advocacy and be their own advocates. It's not for us to decide what a marginalized or outsider group may want to do. Other important piece, it's nonpartisan. Advocacy is nonpartisan political engagement, and we call that Christian discipleship. In General Council 41, we have 2 new decisions, social policies for the United Church. One is around economic action against the products of illegal Israeli settlements. We also have Northern Gateway Pipeline, where we have categorically rejected that pipeline. So there are actual real things that our church at a national level is working on. I say to you all, God in your grace, transform the world and begin with us. World Council Assembly. Thank you.